also, the Father would like to hear from you. You've kind of already done it a little bit without meaning to. I suppose that's just the way things happen. What we originally thought was we'll have talks and then a question and answer thing, but we've sort of done it a little bit at a time throughout the day, which is fine. All I'm going to say is please try to be disciplined about it. I know we're traditional Catholics, it's probably pointless me even asking for that, but if you wouldn't mind not interrupting one another and raising your hands and so on and so on, it just makes for a lot more. It's easy to hear everybody and it's easier to understand everybody, and it doesn't just descend into a general melee which won't be much use to us. Okay? I'll hand you over to
So then, one thing has been traveling, Father Giselle and myself and Father Hugo have been traveling all over the world and meeting with faithful in all kinds of different places. In each place, we always ask them, what have you seen, what have you experienced, and what are your concerns that kind of led you to, here. Because, you look back in the 1970s, it's true that when we talk about the four marks, one, Holy Catholic Apostolic, we find that for many people, it was the apostolic, the lack of the apostolic, or the lack of the holy, or the lack of the Catholic, that was more what shocked them than the lack of the one. It's true that what matters is the faith. Once you change the doctrine of the faith, you're dead. And like Father Hugo said, we were just talking about it the other day, he says, look at the council. When did the modern church get born, and when did the church die, so to speak? Obviously the true church never dies, but when did the conciliar church come into full being? Was it 1965 or was it 1969? 1965, at the end of the council, Latin Mass. Seminaries began to fill up in 66, 67, 68. There was an increase in vocations. There were changes going on over the world. Look at these churches being built. It was something that actually I kind of discovered with Bishop Williamson. We didn't think we would discover this, but it was very interesting. In 2005, Bishop Williamson called me from Argentina, from his exile, but he didn't realize that exile could get worse than that at that time. But he called from his exile and said, the seminary in Winona is too small. We need a new seminary. So I want you to prepare a trip. And I was in New York City area at the time, and our prior in Richfield, Connecticut, to visit seminaries, old seminaries, and we'll see if we can find one that's for sale. I thought we would have 10 days to do that trip. So I thought, that shouldn't take too long. We can go to a lot of places. So I took a 1968 directory, and a 1987 or 89 directory, and then a 2010 directory, or 2001, 2002 directory. And so, there are 100 seminaries. Now there's 3 seminaries. So then I look at the ones that are all closed, and we went and visited them. First I was going to visit seminaries, convents, monasteries, because I thought there would be no problem. Then I discovered that within 150, 200 miles of New York City, there may be more than 1,000 seminaries, monasteries, and convents. We didn't realize that. There's no way we can do all that. So we ruled out all the convents, because there's too many convents. We visited successfully 105 seminaries and monasteries. About 3 of them were actually convents. The rest were all for men. And we visited those because there were just too many convents, too many to visit. And then we worked it out. In fact, during that trip, Bishop Williamson was my chauffeur. He drove the car. I was in the passenger seat, and I was working out the next place to go to. And then we had another lead car. We had it so that we were no stopping. Go to the first place, then we got the direction to the second place, and went to the second place, direction to the third place. So we were able to visit 105 different places in 10 days. And so we were moving. And it was interesting learning the history of these places. Between 66 and 68, some of them were built, constructed. Others, most of them were undergoing an expansion during those years. By 1972, almost all of them were closed. 66 to 68, massive growth. 68 to 72, complete death. Almost everywhere. As we learn the history of these places, that's what happened. Now the death happened when? Not when the new Mass came out. The death happened when the new doctrine was given in the council. Now, as Hugo pointed out that we were discussing a couple of days ago, he says, when did the society die? It's the same. We're finding the same pattern. The doctrine has changed, but we still got the Latin Mass. We still have, some negative anti-Vatican II sermons, not as much like we used to, not as strong, but still something, And then, but it's not like it used to be, and only later on will we find that it's dead, visibly. First you change the inside, then you change the outside. That's what happened. You see? And so that we're seeing the same pattern here. But we're also finding that before you change the inside, certain outside things had to have changed. It's like Dr. Wilhelmsen told me, an old professor of Thomism, he said, we're in the Neo-Middle Ages. And the Catholic culture, first destroy the Catholic culture, bring it down to nothing. Then build a new culture, preparing for the Antichrist. When you tear down a building, you've got to rip down the old building, so that's the violent phase. Then you build a new building. And that's the history of the last 400 years. Tearing down the old building, building the new building. So, we're asking people, and I'm asking people, what things have you seen that concern you, whether it be in the priests or in the parishes, that have made you wonder that, hey, there's something wrong here? What is it that caused you to say there's something wrong, I need to do something about it, or that what's happened in society has changed, or what's concerned you and made you kind of worry about the society and decide to consider, for instance, for establishing a resistance chapel here? I know people are at different levels of what the thing needs to be done, but just what are your concerns and worries? What have you seen? So that's what I'm asking, and just who wants to begin there? Yes.
Firstly, I thank you yourself for agreeing on setting up this conference and quite insightfully. For me, I was generally quite traditional. Generally, I was going at the Indo-Mass about 6 or 7 years ago until I became really traditional. And when I started going through the society, the first thing I noticed is that we used to have St. Joseph used to have 2 masses or so, and it dropped to 1. And I was supposed to this is even before last year. I was in mass dropped on those chapels. It was so concern for me.
Okay, so that's been happening here as well. And in fact, I want to ask about some of the older parishioners, if I just get, because I don't know the history of the English chapels. I told you in the United States we had 105 chapels in '94. We've got 103 now, and yet many chapels have been opened. It's kind of an invisible death. Did you, and yet at the same time, what about your chapels here? I mean, what chapels are less than 10 years old in England? Are there any chapels that were started that didn't exist 10 years ago that exist now?
Right.
I don't mean priory, where it used to be a chapel and now it's a priory. I mean a new mission. Yes, but what about new mission opening? Even some missions, remember, they start in people's houses, they start in Holiday Inns or rented places or whatever. But I'm just saying, the last 10 years, what do you know about the new missions established in England or Scotland or Ireland is now part of the district, but it's England and Scotland and Wales over.
I'll tell you about one place which apparently used to be chapel. My godfather told me they used to have Mass in Hemel Hempstead. I don't know about that. I just want to hear from my godfather, but there is no Mass in Hemel Hempstead now.
So there's several places that have closed.
It was an old People's Day centre.
Oh yes, well, we have many places. All our places started like that. Every place started like that. But so there's several that have closed. How many have closed then? Yes.
Yeah, in Scandinavia, we've only got in Denmark, we've only got one centre. We had 2 until about 6-7 years ago.
Okay, so there's what about openings though? I've got closings, but what about openings? And I mean new ones, not turned into priories, but new ones open.
Not last 2 years, actually.
Okay, then how long ago would have been the last one open approximately back in the 90s?
Bishop, was there one Bishop Elliot on this group?
There's one
North as well, yeah.
late 90s, first one, see, that's last 90s.
And then what about the numbers of priests? Like I told you in the case of the United States, when I was ordained, it was 27 priests, 105 chapels. Now it's 84 priests, 102 chapels. I think 102 chapels. Just doing that in numbers also. You must have had much less priests several years ago. How many priories did you have in 1990? Yeah.
Are you excluding retired priests?
Not non-society, unless they're saying masses for our chapels, we would include them. But if they're their own independent chapels, then we would not include those.
It hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
It's been around about 7 or 8. They've moved some priests from Preston up to Scotland. They've established a new primary in Scotland. Just to serve the...
Well, how many priests do you have now? You've got the Preston,
There's about 12, aren't there? There's
not including Ireland. So,
not including Ireland, there's about 12. But what they've done is they opened a new priory. But all that meant was that instead of having 3 priests here, they had 2 priests there and 2 priests there.
so that's one
So
added priest.
the numbers of priests stay the same.
They just shifted.
There's just one more primary. That's
Well,
it.
then, in 1990, how many priests were stationed here in England? How many priories, how many priests in 1990? So not much less. You still had 8 priests back then?
Yes.
And how many priories back then? You must have had London
There was a school,
and the school.
Yeah, 2.
What about Preston?
yes.
That was in the 80s already when it started? Okay, and you have only the one school. But see, these are all signs of the, again, whereas these are really bad signs in the sense that we're increasing our priests. These are all signs that something's been going wrong for a long time. When we become satisfied with what we have, we're able to survive. And now we basically depend on people dying and giving, the wills to the keeping up the parish. We should be getting converts and new parishioners. But also, go ahead.
The situation with schools was interesting because there was just the one. And I think Father Black wanted to open another further north. I think in the 90s, late 80s. And he gave it up, I think, because there was no interest.
One of the things I wanted to ask, actually, one of the things that always concerned me about, again, I was never stationed in England, but one of the things that always bothered me, and that there was a policy here, which are now establishing in the United States, was essentially, what I understand, for the longest time, Father Black had the rule that only the prior was the pastor of every single parish. And then the other priest, the priest would rotate from the parishes. So one Sunday you get this priest, next Sunday you get that priest. So even if the priest comes to you for 20 years, he's not really your priest.
Yes.
He's just somebody that happens to come on the 3rd and 5th and 2nd Sundays. But even if he's there 20 years and he knows everybody, he's not your priest.
Yes.
There's no actual priest designated to be the pastor. Has it always been that way?
It was until a few years ago, Father Morgan actually made it more, we had regular priests to be there.
Okay. So that's changed recently.
There was another thing you mentioned this morning, which was the amount of generation we had in St. Joseph's.
Yes.
For years, and then suddenly they decided that there wasn't enough interest or enough numbers. And they just closed it down. And then last year, because of the crisis fund, we asked if we started up again. And we've got quite a few people interested, so make sure the first, second, fourth, and 2 people so go all night on Friday, the first Friday.
Yeah.
And one woman just said no. But if you said, it's sort of might say, well, you can get 15 people or 10 people or 10. He just says no, because there's not enough interest.
Right.
Anyway.
I think one of the things that's happened is we're seeing like a despondency. I mean, even good priests, so to speak, but they're becoming like despondent. Like there's a kind of depression setting in. Have you seen that developing?
Yes.
I mean, the priests just aren't as happy as they used to be. I mean, and then another thing I've heard in America, they say, well, it's because of all these young priests, But we're forgetting that now there's a lot of old priests in society. If you remember back in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, if you saw an SSPX priest that was 30 years old, you're giving him a hearing aid, you're giving him a cane, and you're calling him grandpa, right? I mean, you remember back then, a 30-year-old SSPX priest was like grandpa. You remember those days? Unheard of. A priest that was as old as 30 years old. And if you saw an SSPX priest 30, wow, he's experienced. He's a wise man. He's 30. But now you're seeing they're still young priests, but not as many as before. And priests are starting to age with not as many proportionally young priests what we used to have. That's one change. And then they say, well, it's because they're young priests. I'm thinking, well, that doesn't work because, I was 23. I turned 24 just shortly after being ordained, but I was still 23 on the day of my ordination. And there were many priests, 22 and 24, when we were ordained priests. And we were all young. And we just went around and fed mass and opened schools and that's it. We just did those things. But yeah, we were young and made the stupid mistakes that you normally make when you're young. But overall, we were happy and we just worked. And it wasn't, I think you can't argue in the present crisis that it's all because they're young. No, there's something different. They're being trained differently. Do you sense a difference in the priests, in the young ones and the older ones? Do you sense a difference in them here in England? We hear a lot of that in America, that they sense a difference in the younger priests compared to the older priests. You have the same thing in Asia and in Europe. But I'm wondering do you sense a difference in younger priests and older priests here? Say those named in the last 5, 10 years and those are named before.
I think I noticed one by younger priests I know is that they're not as open, they're not very open, they're very cagey. They're able to engage them, get to open out. And so they're really
That's different.
But that's okay.
One of the most only outgoing priests we've got is very young, and the years he can't speak.
Precisely, that's one of the
Right.
So I have to say, apparently he's made comments about being in the heart of the resistance when England was known as being a rebellious country against the agreement, and he's very happy to be stationed here.
Right.
So he's quite small.
Yeah. Okay. So here maybe it's not as noticeable. Then it's more or less similar. You're not noticing any major differences between the younger ones and older ones. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh yes, so
we haven't mentioned the redemptorists, I suppose, quite influential.
Yeah, that's a good question. How influential were the redemptorists? Since their 2007 kind of collapse, I guess you could say.
That was a bad setback. It was a shock. Because down there in Kent, when we had our chapel, we almost had a parish priest in the redemptorists because they'd set up their monastery within an hour or two's drive of the chapel in Herne. And they were, the society priests weren't coming down regularly because the redemptorists were saying the masses.
Oh, so now before they went about
Father Nicholas was almost the parish priest.
Right.
And then Father Martin filled them all up.
They would have, the place where the Spanish Armada sunk. Yeah. Yeah. Then they got sunk.
It's a complication. Because Father Nicholas has his own rebellions from Father Michael.
What do you think of the results of that? Does Father Nicholas come down?
He does, he said.
And then how many monks are with him?
He's just got one brother. Father Nicholas has just got one brother there.
Only one brother, okay.
Yeah.
So the majority are still on the...
Yeah, because one of the brothers left and went to France, and he came back and joined him and replaced one of the other brothers who'd also left. And that brother is now at the school. So.
Yeah. Then of course you got, what's his name, Father Alphonsus in America.
Yeah.
And I think another brother over there. There's 2 in America, in California.
Right.
And then I guess 2 here, so that'd be 4, I guess. Then I guess the majority of them are still on the island.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts at the time of that 2007 crisis with the monks and public transit? What were the effects of that?
I found it very shocking myself because I actually worked for them. We were working on their magazine.
Yeah.
And I heard Father Sim preaching at St. Joseph's a couple of years before, and he was very good. It was quite a shock to me when that defection happened. And such a shock that when Bishop Elliot appeared to be defected, it was no surprise to me. I would have had my shock.
Right.
The Father Montero was always virtually insane.
He was always what?
Virtually insane.
Well, he still does superior, isn't he?
Before the break, before he joined the road, it was a shock that
I've heard it said, Father, I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead. It's true, but I've heard it said that he was leaving Pope's name out of the canon weeks before.
Oh yeah, I've heard that, you know. But again, I never had it verified. Because I only spoke, I had a good, Father Sim, he came to Phoenix once to the parish mission. We spent a lot of time together. And Father, I always call him Father Bernard Mary, you know, because he looks like Brother Bernard perfectly. I always forget it. I think it's Father Nicholas Mary. Who was the assistant? Michael Mary, that's the one. No, Father Michael Mary is Father Sim. Father Nicholas, which one was he? The South African Rhodesian, the South African?
Father Anthony.
Father Anthony.
Yeah, and he looks like Brother Gerard and Brother Bernard. He's now Brother Marcel.
Yeah, Brother Bernard, right? Brother Marcel. He looks just like Brother Bernard, yeah. So I always call him Father Bernard Mary.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I forgot what he used to look just like Brother Bernard. That's Father...
Father Anthony.
Anthony, yeah. So he was there with Father Sam and they preached the retreat. And then his youngest brother was ordained that year. It was back in 98, 99, 2000, something like that. I think before 2000. We had spent a lot of time together talking and whatever. But then, you know, there wasn't any, you know, that was a long time ago, I guess, now. And, you know, there was good mission that they preached down there. I didn't really see any difficulties, you know, at that time. But I don't know, I mean, what is the, is there much interaction between the people of the various parishes? Do you all know each other? Like here in this room, do you all know each other?
No.
But everybody's from London, right? Yeah. Yeah, because one of the purposes, we need to get to know each other. We need to get to know each other because, you know, one thing I've noticed, even in our small chapels, in the beginning, whenever we started the chapel, like in this situation, you got to bring the candlesticks, you know, you bring the host, you bring the wine, and blah, 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 and we set up. It always means 50 people come to Mass, one person does everything. But theoretically, you know, everybody's helping, you know, and that's never the case, but that's a theory. And then they come in and have the Mass, but everybody knows each other, there's a lot of contact. But I've noticed over the years that even in our small parishes, you know, 50 people in the parish, 100 people in the parish, and they don't know each other. That's kind of you just go to Mass, escape, been going there for 3 or 4 or 5 years. I think he's a parishioner there. He's one of the other 3 people in Mass. You know, and they don't know each other. We have to make sure that in this time of crisis, one of the ways of preserving the faith is that we have to get to know each other. There are many beneficial effects of that. One of them is, if there's only 30 people in your parish, and you're really tired on a Sunday morning, you don't feel like going to Mass, and everybody knows you, next Sunday you're going to give an explanation. And so you're like, get up, you know, because you don't want to have to give an explanation. So the next thing you know, it explains. If you see that in the past, people were sometimes good just because of peer pressure. They didn't want to do it. And so, but the fact is that it becomes an added benefit. Then you disappear for 3 or 4 weeks, somebody calls you up, hey, what's going on? Know where you've been? You know, we want to see you again, etc. So the interconnection is very important, and we have to reestablish that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends on Mass times. I mean, where I go to is the Church of Holy Cross in Woking, and in Mission, we used to have Mass on 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and we had Bible reading.
Right.
And then because of the lack of priests, they moved it to 5 o'clock instantly. It just went down, and now we have a congregation of about possibly 20 people in this massive big church, and it hasn't grown at all.
Actually, it's actually more than that, because the Boys Church is I've counted kids twice in Mass.
Well, in a big church, it's hard to tell. It looks like nobody's there when you count them.
Leicester too. Leicester was another one that did that.
But the thing is, you have more priests than you had before, and you don't have more chapels.
We don't have that many priests.
You had 8 and you had 12, and you're talking about 3 or 4 chapels that have closed. Only one open.
Well, in the Scandinavian mission took priests off.
But that's added to it. But that's Father, Winston goes there once a month, right? And also, but like, twice a year. Is it, how many days is that circuit?
It's about 10 days, so it includes 2 weekends.
Right, okay. Okay, that's what they usually do.
That circuit started in 2001.
Okay, alright.
And it was, at first it was twice a month. So there were 2 Sundays a month. But about a year or so ago, on Middlewell, it changed to a 10-day.
Okay, so there's two back to back, and then you wait for the next month, and then back to back. Okay.
The other problem, of course, with having a mass at 5:30 in the afternoon is the little children don't get there. They don't experience the atmosphere of mass and church, and you know the mothers have to get them to bed. Then it's too late for them.
Speaking of which, what about the families? You know, I mean, the children is the most important thing. Do you have a decrease in families in recent years?
I think there are a lot more children at mass when you're in the morning.
Yes, go ahead.
For traditional day, on the Westminster, which is second Vatican.
What is that again? I'll say that again. I didn't catch
For
it.
traditional day, are we on the Westminster, which is second Vatican?
Are we under the license?
Oh no, we're not under the local diocese. No. See, well, actually, it's like this. Truly, we are under the local diocese. We pray for the bishop and the canon of the mass and so on. So, in fact, we're truly under the local diocese. We're being truly obedient to the diocese, doing what the diocese is supposed to be doing. The unfortunate thing is that the other 500 priests of the diocese aren't. And so, so in fact, we are being obedient to the diocese by teaching the Catholic faith and giving the Catholic sacraments without compromising the Catholic diocese. Unfortunate thing is, the other priests of the diocese, even if they're nice priests, are saying the new mass, which is destroying the Catholic faith, teaching heresy, which is really bad for the Catholic faith, and they are not spreading the true faith. And then even the good ones are just simply keeping some people along, making people tolerate modernism, so they're not spreading the faith. And that's why you see a massive exodus of the church over the last 40 years, 50 years. So the only answer is priests got to stand up to that, and the faithful got to stand up to that, and reestablish chapels like this. You know. Yes.
Just very quickly, another Stephen question. You talked about experience of priests, and there's one particular priest I've known 3-4 years before I started attending Mass at the Society, and I can see he's been quite withdrawn to me. He's still a lovely man, but the problem I have is I have some questions. So I'm thinking of doing maybe a short degree or a course in theology. He said to me, "What is the point?" And when he said that, I just wanted to.
Well, you know, of course, nowadays it's true. There isn't much point studying theology nowadays because they don't know anything about it. You know, if you don't. And one thing about the modern seminaries, I think one of my duties in India and Asia was to meet with priests, and met with about more than 300 priests and about 20-25 bishops. And in their modern education, they don't learn the faith. They learn the opposite of the faith. And they have 12 years of training in the modern seminaries. And the 12 years are not to help you prepare you to become a priest, but to help you to unlearn your faith, so that whatever you knew when you entered, you will not know it when you ordain. And they're going to create doubt. They spend 12 years of creating confusion and doubt and corruption. And then you get ordained. And and then some people who survive it, if it goes on the side, they're doing their own secret studies, and they can only survive to a certain extent. And now we're finding the same thing has happened in the Society of Seminaries, that there's a new education. I was speaking with the young seminarians. They are the new priests. They're trying. You can see what they've learned in the seminary. That the Council of Basel, the Council of Constance, one priest told me there were many things in it that weren't right, that weren't correct, and had to be corrected later on. The church later said this doctrine was right, that one was wrong, and you can see how they're preparing them to apply that principle to Vatican II. So I asked, okay, so what you're saying is that Vatican II is really not that much different than the councils that came before. He goes, well, not exactly, because he didn't want to admit that. And I said, and so I told the young priest, I said, I went to the same building you went to the seminary. They even sat in the same classroom, but I didn't learn that crap. We didn't get taught that baloney. We were taught clear Catholic doctrine, and Vatican II was a council completely other, completely different than every other council in history. And you're getting this new historical training, this new science training, this new political training that is making you become confused about the faith. Father Theman, young priest in society, just gave a talk against the resistance. It's called The Resistance to What? And just a few weeks ago. And in that, he quotes Lumen Gentium number 25. And he says, read Lumen Gentium number 25 yourself. You'll see there's nothing there that any Catholic could ever question. That's what he says. Read Lumen-Gentium number 25, and you'll find there's nothing there objectionable to a Catholic. Now, Lumen-Gentium number 25 says that we're obliged to believe whatever the bishop says with a firm will, whether it's true or not, as long as you've got a firm will. So if he tells you, you must accept that this wall is purple, and I want you to really believe that, then you got to believe it's purple. Because he said it with a firm will. And then you got to listen to the bishop, not just the pope, but the bishop. So the bishop of this diocese says death penalty is still according to the law of God. You got to believe the death penalty. But if you go to the next diocese across the border, well, that bishop believes the death penalty is a mortal sin, just like John Paul II. So they're going to change doctrine. So you got to know where you are. What do I believe? What diocese am I in? Okay. Well, I got to check with the bishop. And I asked so many priests, in those 300 priests, I said, "What do you believe, Father? Do you know what I believe?" "Yes." "Check with the bishop." Check with the bishop. He can tell you what I believe, because I don't really know. I got to check with him. See, now we should be able to say what we believe without checking with the bishop. That's all Lumen-Gentium number 25. Father Theoden says there's no problem with Lumen-Gentium number 25. Now, who's going to look it up? So there's a weakening of the faith. And one thing I'm asking is, are you seeing less attacks against Vatican II? When there is attacks, they're less clear or less powerful than they used to be. When they talk about the kingship of Christ, I mean, look at who read the consecration of the Sacred Heart of Bishop Fillet last year, which was made in Winona. They made it all over the world. You read that document, the consecration of the Sacred Heart? Yeah, I did not go to it. I was there last year, but I did not go into the tent for that one. You know, that was an ordination. But you know what it says? The Sacred Heart, you are the Jesus Christ, you are the King of Hearts. King of Hearts. I know about the Queen of Hearts. I read about her. You know, and then also I'm from America. I know about the King of Rock and Roll. Okay. Now you got the King of Rock and Roll. You got the Queen of Hearts. Now we got the King of Hearts. That is blasphemy.
It's the same with morality as well, because when the government of this country passed the gay marriage laws recently, I didn't hear any sermons preached against it in any SSP.
Right. That's what about when Pope Francis became Pope? What did you hear? You know,
my Father Morgan did give a very good sermon about the response. But that was it.
What about the resigning of Pope in the 16th? Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, we did
What did they say about it?
Father Lynch said it was a complete sign of weakness on the church's behalf.
Okay, that's something. That's something. Yes, go ahead.
There was Saturday, so 2 days ago on Thursday, when it was called Christian, the priest where I went to Mass said, quite correctly, he said that in the old days you used to have a Corpus Christi, and you would have a Corpus Christi procession, and it would go into the streets, and this is because it's bringing Christ into the public sphere where he has to reign in public, and Vatican II religious liberty dethroned Christ, and that's why Vatican II and Corpus Christi are contradictory to one another, because religious liberty takes Christ out of the public sphere. That's why in the modern church they don't have processions in the streets anymore, and so on and so on. And I thought to myself at the time, and people who are here can correct me if I'm mistaken, but certainly in the big church in London there's not a procession. There's a token procession kind of to the back of the church and back again down the aisle. There's
Well, you used to have one in the past.
Well, they used to go out the door and in through the. They used to have processions that went out the door and into the TV. Well,
normally you do it 2 days, Corpus Christi or Corpus Christi Sunday, if you don't do it on the day itself, and Christ the King. Both days we normally do that.
So there's, okay, so
2 times a year.
The reason I mention that is merely because, in a way, he's quite correct what he said. But we don't do processions either. There is a procession. There's a procession of Bristol. And it's and it's the district's Corpus Christi procession. If you want to have a Corpus Christi procession, you have to do it.
They had a small procession at the school, I believe, as well.
But you used to have those things in the past. It used to be standard,
The Corpus Christi procession this year, if I'm not mistaken, I remember reading the news that it was that's not taking place this year because of Bishop's Fairlane visit.
Yes.
Yes, this is it.
Wait a minute. Because Bishop Fillets, oh, you mean it would normally be this Sunday, but because of Bishop Fillets, he's going to give us, he has to give a 7-hour talk or whatever it is.
Well, I read that the in Bristol, because of it, for some reason, which I like that. I mean,
Nothing's changed.
I thought Father Kim would be there anyway to do it, and we needed one priest to alter the sacrament at that very minimum.
Right.
You know.
Well, the thing is, there's just what's happened is that there's just a diminishing of the apostolic spirit. But one of the challenges is this: there's another side of this whole thing, and that is that when you see the doctrinal collapse, what some will do is try to work against it by doing something spiritual. So we're going to say more rosaries, or we're going to do. But see, once you've got a doctrinal collapse, you need to condemn that doctrinal collapse. And so, like my brother, for instance, is kind of doing that. He's just adding things, adding things. He's very apostolic padre. But in order to kind of keep them thinking about what's happening. Yes.
Yeah, just to give you a sort of comparison between how built it is. SSPX in 2013 and SSPX 11 years ago in 2002. In 2002, the BBC decided to put on a blasphemous program about the Blessed Virgin Mary, making blasphemous allegations about her, how she had more children, how blah blah blah. So it was just a period then was Father Emery. Father Emery preached against this program from the pulpit, and that evening he had 100 or so traditional Catholics outside the BBC television centre saying the rosary. I've not seen anything comparable since then. And all the terrible things have happened, like gay marriage, etc. But in no such powerful sermons from the pulpit, no demonstrations or anything.
Well, those things used to be very common in society in the past, going on pilgrimages, going in front of the... I know a few years ago we had in New York, in Washington, D.C., 500,000 people on March for Life in January. My brother just took over the whole thing. They thought that he was in charge of the March for Life. And so, he just went in front of the courthouse. He stands on the fence. There's a what do you call it? My brother was kind of the king of processions. Father Tim was a priest of the society, 5 years older than me. He stood on the cones where you can't stand. Cops roll around. He blasted everybody. We're doing the litany of the saints, and everybody thought that he was in charge of the 500,000 people. All we were was just a group of just a few people going in and took over the whole operation. And that kind of thing used to kind of happen in the society before. Yes.
So I just think, to be fair to Father Morgan and everything, I get the feeling that they've lost heart, because I know lots of people know them a long time, but from things they were saying in the 90s, Father Clifton and Father Morgan, it's as though, especially Father Clifton, they were losing heart. I remember Father Clifton saying, we're not getting anywhere, it's because we're not good enough, and all this kind of thing. But Father Morgan to be very, very fiery, very, very apostolic, and so did Father Clifton. I just think they've lost heart.
Oh, you feel like they're losing that if they don't see a hope kind of thing. That's one of the reasons why I think it's important to do this work, is that because you never know what's inside the heart of a man and who's going to be the one that stands up. You can never really know, and so that when you don't see an answer, we see the changes. But see, in the priesthood, we do get persecuted, kicked around, all that sort of thing. That's a standard thing that happens. It can sometimes be discouraging. But when you don't see an answer, or when you don't see a solution, that's when you just go down. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important that we travel around, that we do this work, that we establish chapels. We've got to give hope. There is always hope. We all know that. A lot of times if you're swimming in the ocean, you don't really see a boat, and you don't really see a little inner tube, you're going to get discouraged. You're going to probably think that eventually I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. And so, we need something to kind of hold us afloat, Yeah. But and what about the doctrinal issues? Who's been reading? How much of you are considering this crisis as being a real doctrinal crisis?
Can I just say?
Yes.
For me, it's blinding recently. When they were talking with Rome, the Pope was saying we can only look at doctrine. I wasn't surprised at that. My expectations of him were very low. But I was a bit shocked when Bishop Fillets agreed. And for me, that was it.
You mean that Bishop Fillets agreed to on the doctrinal principles.
He agreed that but he conceded that the Pope when he said that he wanted, they could overlook the doctrinal principles for the moment.
Oh, they could put them aside. Right.
Because the
Right.
Catholic wouldn't say that.
That's right. Once you put aside the doctrine, that means
That's it.
You're not a Catholic.
No.
It's kind of like the soldiers. I'm going to go fight the Russians, and say I'm going to fight you, but let me just put aside my gun real quick.
Yes.
And then let's fight. But you don't have to put aside your gun. And so that means you're dead. You see.
Yeah, it's blindingly simple.
Yes, it's true that it is, but it's good to see from a doctrinal standpoint. And I think also the priests there is a new direction from above that stops us from doing things that we used to do.
Yeah.
We used to open chapels, open schools, and when I built the church in Denver, Colorado, $3.5 million church, we got permission to build a church, and Father Scott said, look, if it goes belly up, and if it goes bad, Father Peter Scott was in Boston, America at the time, I had nothing to do with it, it's all your problem. And I said, okay, no problem. And if it goes all right, I gave you permission. I said, no problem, I can deal with that. And then we sent the papers in, the mentioning and said there's going to be an altar in the front, there's going to be a door in the back. Okay, you approve. And then we just built it. Now what happens is, there's so much red tape, and this is something which a priest, I talked to a priest in Mexico, and gave a very good name for it. He calls it the bonsai technique. You know how you make a bonsai tree? I used to think you plant a bonsai tree. There is no bonsai tree. Any tree can be a bonsai tree. All you do is trim it every week. And when you get a 100-year-old oak, you take a photograph of it. It looks exactly like a 100-year-old oak outside. It's just that it's this big. It's 3 inches tall instead of being 50 feet tall. And the bonsai technique, he says, he noticed it being done as early as the late 80s, early 90s. But he says that the bonsai technique is what he sees one of the principal techniques used to destroy the apostolates in the SSPX. Well, how does it apply? I asked permission to build a school. No problem. Of course you can build a school. Oh, but that paper is now, you got to send in this paperwork. Oh, that's not approved. This is not. Keep sending in paperwork. Keep sending in, make more approvals. This is not. This is a requirement. New requirements. New requirements. Next thing you know, you don't have a school. But they never said you can't have a school. Of course you can have a school. It's just that by the time you go through all the red tape, you don't have a school. And so they never said no. And now with regard to construction, they want these big companies to build $50 million seminaries, for instance, which is going to be garbage. I already know. I haven't visited a construction site in Virginia, but I already know they're doing a garbage job and they're ripping off the society. I know the concrete's bad. I haven't seen it. I'm sure the concrete's bad. I know they're using they're not putting enough rebar in like they're supposed to. I'm 175% convinced of all that because they're working for the church and we got idiots in charge. They're ripping them off. And so they're doing bad quality construction. They are not doing the right concrete. They're charging millions and millions and millions of dollars, and everything's a change order. And you have all these requirements, and you got to pay the architect and everything else. One guy told me that we had to sell a property and to pay $67,000 to the lawyer who signed the paper on the property. Right? Not the selling the $67,000 so we can live here. We had it sold. So, and it's insane. So, what they do is they put so much red tape. So now you mail the plans to Kansas City if you're in America. They look at it, they send it back, correct it. Then you mail it to Kansas City. They see it's okay. Then it gets mailed to Benzingen. All that light switch is in the wrong place. Boom, it comes back. Then it goes back and forth. It could go on for 10 years. They've been trying to build a church in Phoenix since I was going to build a church there. And they've been trying to build it ever since then. They still haven't started. That's the bonsai technique. One thing after another, one thing after another, and then they transfer the priests, and then it just all starts all over again, so that you have all these apostles who want to begin, and they never begin.
Father, didn't they do the same in Yugoslavia for Aleda Medjugorje, the communist regime, when they give you lip service after you've got approval, but then there's bureaucracy, and there's all that kind
of... Medjugorje...
Price, for the statue.
No, but they like Medjugorje. It's good money for Yugoslavia.
No, but it was communist.
Yes. Yeah, they let you in on Medjugorje, because Medjugorje is garbage. Medjugorje is... I wish you could say it's straight from hell, but I think they're just a bunch of charlatans. To say it's straight from hell is giving it too much credit. They're just charlatans. And they're gangsters and they're charlatans over there. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the two raging crusades of the present crisis?
The Rosary Crusades are key, absolutely essential in the deception, not only of the faithful, but also the priests. Because we know that Our Lady is going to bring the victory. How do you capture that notion? Because we all know Our Lady brings the victory means consecrate Russia, Immaculate Heart triumphs, sudden, miraculous, inexplicable victory. So how do you get around that one? Rosary Crusades. Rosary Crusades are the stroke of genius. They were essential to this corruption. You tell people, Mary is going to bring the victory. Let's have a Rosary Crusade for them to lift the Latin Mass, to free the Latin Mass, back in 2007. When they had made the deal they were going to do that 10 years before. And I remember when Pope Benedict XVI became Pope in 2005, we expected that he would free up the Latin Mass before the end of 2005. Then we thought he would do it before the end of 2006. He said, what's taking so long? Then they made a Rosary Crusade. Did you ever see the movie Apocalypto? You know, the Inca priest or whatever is killing, cutting out the hearts because there's an eclipse. Well, they know there's an eclipse, so they're watching the sun and the moon, you know. The gods are making the sun disappear. We're going to sacrifice to the gods. And then they wait. Well, the sun's coming out. Stop sacrificing. So they stop the sacrifice. Now the gods have heard our prayer. And sure enough, the sun came out. Can you imagine that? All right? That's why they stopped sacrificing, because they were watching. Okay, one more. Okay, one more. Okay, one. Okay, stop. Okay, gods have heard our prayer. You know, and that's exactly what they did with the Rosary Crusade. Same trick. But then what happened? Not only the faithful, but the priests said, oh, Our Lady gave the victory. Our Lady freed up the Latin Mass. And if you don't agree with Summorum Pontificum, you don't like Our Lady. See? Then the next miracle happens. Rosary Crusade was essential in deception. And that's why I think heaven is punishing the Society of St. Vincent very heavily, because they brought Blessed Virgin Mary in. That's blasphemy and mockery. And they're using the name of Mary. They didn't even do that at Vatican II. They just said, look, I'm the Pope, I'm the Bishop, I'm the boss, I know better than you, shut up and listen. That's easier to deal with, even if they're liars. But when you say, I'm the Bishop, I'm the boss, shut up and listen, and besides, if you don't listen to me, you don't love Mary. That's worse.
They were wasted that devotion, aren't they?
No, anything you do with with a good devotion is not wasted. No, of course, it's going to be a great benefit. Remember, when you pray for somebody who's dying and gone to hell, you know, many people you pray for, maybe they're in hell. The prayer doesn't benefit them, but the prayer benefits someone else in purgatory. The prayer also always benefits yourself. Of course, it's always a benefit to say the prayer, but that was not the benefit. That was a deception. And the Rosary Crusades were essential to this crisis. Absolutely essential. I've had priests come to me and say, well, Father, but look, the Rosary Crusades. Maybe Our Lady is using the society to convert Rome through these Rosary Crusades. This is the Marian victory. And now we've forgotten about the Marian victory. We used to talk about it. But we already had the Marian victory because we had the Rosary Crusades, right? So now we're finished with the Marian victory. And it was our rosaries that gave the victory. It's not going to be our rosary that gives the victory. It's going to be the Blessed Virgin Mary that gives the victory. We need to pray our rosary, but it's not the power of our little prayers. It's ridiculous to think that. It's Our Lady when the moment she chooses.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
There were lots of rumours on the internet alleging that Bishop Pfeiffer was surrounding himself with a lot of yes-men and supporters, and that this was potentially very dangerous. Did no one see it coming?
You know what? I would say that, yes, some saw it coming, but very few. But also, with regard to these things, we're a religious order. You know, if he chooses a bad man to be his advisor, what are we going to do? We just have to live with it. We have to live with adversity and with bad decisions as part of being a religious. Not only in religious life, but also in your regular life, you have to deal with bad decisions. We have to live with it until such time as they attack the faith. Then once they attack the faith, we can't live with it anymore. Right? And that's what happened in 2012. That's why, even if you could see it coming, I knew there were grave troubles in the society, but I always thought it was more of a moral thing. Kind of a, you know, we get proud of ourselves and become corrupt and lazy and whatever else, which is, you know, that's normal. It's original sin. Nothing to be worried about too much. It's bad, causes harm to souls. We've got to fight against it, but we can live in those kind of world. Just like the quote the Father Hugo gives all the time. What's quote? What is it? What was that? Which saint? Who said it? That the church can survive moral, but it can't survive doctrinal. Some bishop.
St. Athanasius. The Catholic Church cannot survive compromise.
No, there's another quote you were giving me the other day, which is, the church can survive moral evils. If we have moral evils and moral evils, the church will survive.
Oh, that's Bishop Frappel of Angers.
Yeah, how did he say it?
It's a long quote.
Yeah. But he basically said, if there's evil, wicked men that are popes, evil, wicked men that are bishops, evil, wicked men that are abbots, living immoral lives, the church can survive. Because they can always repent, and souls can still be saved by a sinful priest. Right? You know, like in the Irish priests in America, they always put the whiskey in their confessional. They'll put it on the people's side because they'll steal it. Put it on the priest's side. Nobody's allowed to go on the priest's side. So there's always a bottle of whiskey in there on the priest's side. Okay, now you can get an absolution from a drunk priest, no problem. And you're absolved, right? And so if you've got moral problems, they can be overcome, you know. But the doctrinal problems are the death. And that was that quote of the Bishop of Angers. Yes.
You were talking about James the Reed notice. One of the priests in England said that he had seen that traditionally the societies were very open, and that the Archbishop, when he was teaching in the seminary, would go along and talk to the seminarians and say, "This is my position. You know, you don't have to come with me. This is what I think. This is where we are. We agree that we don't. You either stay or you go. It doesn't really matter." But he said there's always, even with the seminarians, you know, first or second year, talking to an archbishop, there was always a free exchange of views, and people were allowed to talk about pretty much whatever they wanted. He said slowly he observed over the last 20 years that free discussion was closed down on pretty much everything. Did the priests see that happen, or was that just...
I would say Bishop Williamson is a great example. I remember, you know, Bishop Williamson, he believes that there was... that there weren't 6 million people that died in the Holy Gospel. And he used to talk about it sometimes at the seminary. But I remember a guy about 1 year behind me. He's now an apostolic priest. And he was society, and he got ordained in Trinity St. Peter. He left, and now he's an apostolic priest. I'm still friends with him, we keep in contact. He's a Puerto Rican from New York. But he's always been the same, you know. We were in the seminary, he was a pharmacist guy. And Bishop Williams said, you know, there were not 6 million Jews killed in the gas chambers. He goes, you're crazy, Bishop. You're nuts. During class, right? He goes, well, you might be right. You might be right, but you know, you should read the Oyster report and check the evidence. You know, and then, so then he had horrible handwriting. He was a pharmacist, so he was a pharmacist. So the bishop made him come in on Wednesdays, and he would do handwriting, penmanship. So he would sit there in the bishop's office and do penmanship. While he was doing penmanship, the bishop would read the Oyster report. And he would read to him, and he'd go, you understand that, Paul? You know, he goes, you're crazy, you're nuts. And he never got kicked out of class. He was never threatened to not be ordained. He didn't get absent in his class. You know, we just thought it was, but there was no pressure. And also when you could, if you disagree, but it was a matter of the faith, you're a dead man. But in these other things, which even though they're important, people have differing views on them. Even though they're very important and they have a part to play in our battle. So he allowed that divergence. We used to have a divergence of opinions. I remember Monday, Bishop Williamson would give a talk on the spiritual conference about Maria Valtorta and how holy she was. You know, and then on Tuesday, Father Del Blas would give a talk on Maria Valtorta being close relative of Lucifer. And then, you know, and so we said, what about Father Del Blas going to say on Tuesday? That'll be interesting. You know, and so but there was never, there was no, there used to be a healthy interaction. Also, there were a great variety of personalities in the seminary. You see that amongst the priests. Now you see it amongst the new priests. They're like little photocopies of each other. They came out of a photocopy machine, you know. And they are not the same. They're all identical to each other. We didn't used to have that. And also, we were always encouraged to think. Use your brain, think, know the truth, understand it, be able to explain it in your own words, and then fight for it. And also, since we were trained to be disobedient, there was never a major focus on obedience. You had to be obedient. If you were disobedient in a heavy way, you're going to be expelled. You had to follow the rule. But there was not an overemphasis about obedience, because we go to dioceses and we're disobedient to bishops. That's what we do. And so we didn't take ourselves all that seriously. But then we started to take ourselves too seriously. And there was a change.
It was ironic that the Bishop Pfeiffer and all the people on his side of the fence who have been supported for years by a group of Catholics who have made it their business to be disobedient to the local authorities, suddenly turned around to us when we were disobedient to what they wanted to do, and so we had to be obedient. Well, why didn't they see the irony of it? Did they think we were
right? Those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Right?
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, we are. That's why it's so difficult to believe in our crisis. Why are we doing exactly the same thing they did in the 70s? Why don't we, since we know the whole history of the crisis, why don't we put a little special twist on it? Make it sound different. Don't talk about blind obedience. 7 minutes. Don't talk about blind obedience. Say, this is the correct faith. Getting to Archbishop Lefebvre. Let's suppose that Archbishop Lefebvre believed we had to make a deal with Rome. How would he do it? He would stand up and say, okay, we used to say we cannot make a deal with Rome because of their modernism. Now we realize that there are some signs of change in Rome and that we can't continue like this forever because we're losing the ability to be able to convert and work with these people. And here are some bishops that can help us out. Here's the reason why we need to change and make a deal with Rome. Here's the reason why we're going to talk with the Romans. We're not going to not compromise, but we do have to make some adjustments here, adjustments there. These are what the adjustments are. Then we'd argue about it. No problem. You disagree, I'm not going to remove you as superior. I'm not going to remove you as a rector or a professor in a seminary. And then, when the time comes, we make a deal with Rome. Whoever wants to go along with it, go along with it. Whoever thinks it's morally wrong, fine, you go ahead and break away. Just like 88. Open, clear, explained, not stand on his authority. If anybody had the right to stand on his wisdom and stand on his authority, that's what Lefebvre. I remember 88, we're from America, this is Frog Bishop, Lefebvre, something like that, I don't remember. But anyway, the fact is, why are we having consecration of bishops? Because I need a priest to teach me the Catholic faith is not modernist. And who says the Latin Mass. He can't be a priest unless there's a bishop to ordain him. And he's 120 years old, he's going to die tomorrow. So, he needs to consecrate more bishops so that we can keep our Catholic faith, preserve the Catholic priesthood, and preserve the Catholic faith for the whole church. For the restoration of the whole church, for the preservation of my little parish, for the hope of vocations in the future, for the whole good of the church, there has to be a consecration of bishops. There has to be preservation of the faith. Now, what's the name of that guy? Pfeiffer or something. He wasn't important. It was the faith and the salvation of souls and the preservation of the priesthood that was important. And that was the focus. We should have said, he was a Holy Ghost father, he was Superior General for 12 years, he opened 40 seminaries, he was one of the early missionaries, he was friends with Pope, he was an apostolic delegate under Pope John the 23rd, and he was so wise and so holy, we should trust the Holy Archbishop. Did you ever hear that in 88? Whoever was around in those days? You never heard that. Never. It was always about the faith. And he was the one who was standing for it, and that was his strength. Archbishop Lefebvre knew his strength was in the faith. His strength was not in his own person. Bishop Pfeiffer doesn't realize that. He thinks his strength is in his own holiness of person, and how he acts like Archbishop Lefebvre in his behavior, how he smiles, how he holds his head, how he talks with holiness, how he carries himself. And notice in a Bishop Pfeiffer sermon, or a Bishop Pfeiffer conference, for 3 hours or 7 hours, however long it is. 7 was a record in Argentina just last year. What is he doing? No, he is saying something. He's selling himself.
Yes, that's what
He is showing to you, I am intelligent because I can say more words than you.
We heard something on the internet when I was saying this to other people today in Australia. I listened to, it must have been 30, 40 minutes of it. And he didn't say anything. He said a lot of words, but he didn't.
But you know, the Australian one is very interesting. All the talks, I like that one. The one you're referring to, Adelaide talk. One thing is it's only 2 hours long, which is unheard of. That's like a 10-minute sermon. It's only 2 hours long. But in that particular talk in Adelaide last year, it's very revealing because he gives his doctrine. He gives some of the theological foundation of what he's doing. And he talks about the dead body of Christ. And how the dead body of Christ is dead after, 3 p.m. Good Friday. But the death gives life. The death produces life. And then he tries to apply that to the situation in the church today. The church is dead. The church is dead. But somehow life is coming from the death. It's really a very kind of demonic thing. Death does not produce life. Right? But he somehow is trying to mix a theology where the church is really dead, but it's still divine, therefore it's giving life. Death doesn't give life unless it's the dead body of Christ.
So you must have said it in the last part, because I have to say it.
That's in the first part. But you get ahead of it because it's kind of not that clear. Yeah. But yeah, it's time. But anyway, one other, and then we better go. We've got 1 minute here. Yes.
Is it not significant that the excommunications were lifted on the 4 bishops, but not on Archbishop Pfeiffer and Archbishop Patrick?
It is extremely significant, yes. First, it couldn't be lifted, because obviously they weren't laid down. It's like, we mentioned the sermon last year, May 27th. You can't rise from the dead unless you're dead. One of the conditions. If you're not dead, you can't rise. And, so the, what do you call it? And then the other 2 bishops remain excommunicated. And that's why I mentioned in the sermon last year. The excommunication is the glory of Archbishop Lefebvre. You don't take that away from him. You don't take the sword away from St. Paul. You don't take the cross away from St. Peter. That's their glory. That's how they went to heaven. And excommunication is the glory of Archbishop Lefebvre. He will carry that excommunication to his glory. It was a martyrdom that he received for Christ. He'll never let go of that excommunication. He'll hold on to that forever. That's his glory. Just like St. Paul holds on to his sword to chop his head off, and St. Peter holds on to his cross. And all the martyrs hold on to what the means that made them going to heaven. And the excommunication was the means to heaven. We don't want that lifted. We just need Rome to convert and come back to the truth.
When we're with the excommunication, Rome was saying, well, we can't teach the Archbishop because he's an enemy. But Bishop Ferre, Bishop St. Mallory,
it was very, it was very bad. I remember I called Bishop Williams back in 2009 and I was really mad and screaming and yelling and everything else. I wasn't saying thank you for the excommunication being lifted, because I know it can't be lifted, but the decree was lifted. Not the excommunication, but the decree of the excommunication. But and he wasn't happy about it. He was just doing it to try to maintain unity. And I think it was a mistake, But, they were saying, well, we don't like it either, but, let's just see how things develop. So the 3 bishops weren't happy about it, but they kind of went along. And I think that was the beginning of the slide, And now it's clear, more clear now. And that's when Father Abrahamovich, was expelled.
They betrayed the founder.
Yeah, there's a complete betrayal of the founder, and it was very serious. But it's time now.